We are now just 1 week away from this new championship season getting underway, and it's now time to drop my 1 to 24 predictions. I really feel like this could be one of the most competitive seasons we've seen in the championship in quite some time at both ends of the table, and that's why, for me, it's been such a tough league to predict this season. Now, obviously, take some of these predictions with a pinch of salt. Things could change between now and the end of the transfer market, depending on what business these clubs do between now and then. But as things currently stand, this is how I'm feeling. I'd love to get your guys' verdict on these predictions in the comments down below. Drop your own personal 1 to 24s down there. Make sure to subscribe if you're new around here. We'll be doing weekly championship predictions for all the games as well. But without any further ado, let's just jump in. So predicted to finish in 24th and rock bottom of the table, I have got Sheffield Wednesday. It gives me no pleasure predicting any club to be relegated, but Wednesday are looking like the obvious candidates right now. It's been an absolutely disastrous summer for the club off the pitch. The squad has been absolutely ravaged. There's concerns whether they'll be even able to field a competitive squad for their first game of the season against Leicester, with more delayed payments coming for the month of July as well. Now, we have had confirmation of Henrik Pedersen taking the Wednesday job, replacing Danny Roll, and I commend anyone going into that situation right now, the amount of fires that he's going to be fighting this season. But ultimately, with how thin the squad looking, how likely more departures are looking between now and the end of the window as well, it's very tricky to see Wednesday not finishing bottom at this stage. Predicted to finish in 23rd, I've then gone for Oxford United. Now, Oxford fans, feel free to shoot me down in the comments, and this may be another example of me underestimating you, like I was certainly guilty of doing last season. But the more I've looked into it and how competitive I think the bottom of the championship's going to be this season, the more I think that Oxford could be susceptible to drop into that bottom three this season. Now, first of all, let's get the positives out of the way. I really like Gary Rowett as a manager. Obviously did a cracking job last season to keep Oxford afloat, and fairly comfortably in the end. I think that Jamie Cumming is a really competitive goalkeeper for this level. I think defensively, when everyone's fully fit, Oxford have got a decent setup, and also in midfield, the addition of Brian de Keersmaker looks to be a nice addition to play alongside someone like a Cameron Brannigan. But the front end of the pitch is where things start to fall apart for me. I think quality-wise, you could make the argument that, barring Sheffield Wednesday, Oxford arguably have the weakest strike force in the division right now. Currently Mark Harris and Tom Bradshaw, and there's not a great deal of quality coming from those wide areas either, in my opinion. You also couple that with the fact that by most underlying metrics last season, Oxford were a bottom three side who did overperform. So for expected points, XG, shots taken, shots on target, all those stats, Oxford ranked in the bottom three last season. Rowett, we know, will be quite a defensive manager coming into this season anyway, and you wouldn't imagine the needle's going to move too much on that front. But having that lack of quality just makes me think that, are they going to win enough games this season to keep their head above water? Listen, it feels a bit dirty backing against Gary Rowett, especially in the relegation battle. But as things stand right now, I just think the lack of goals could be a killer for Oxford. Predicted to finish in 22nd and also going down, I've gone for Hull City. It feels like an obvious pick at the moment, with obviously all the chaos going on behind the scenes at the club this summer, but I am a little bit 50-50 on Hull at the moment, and whether I think they could actually improve on last season's finish, which seems a bit mental considering all the chaos there. But pre-season, from the outside looking in so far for Hull, has been quite promising. Listen, you can't read too much into pre-season, but it feels like with Sergei Akirovic, they've stumbled across quite a decent manager who works quite well with the characters that are already at the club. Last season for Hull, considering the quality of that squad, it was an underachievement. Obviously, they were ravaged by injuries at different points of the campaign, but if Akirovic can tap into some of those players who underperformed last season, there is potential there for Hull to kick on. It just feels like the powers that be that are coming from above could have the ultimate influence on what happens for Hull this season and how it unpans. For example, because of the EFL restrictions currently on the club, they've not been able to register the likes of Gustavo Poitre, who's obviously on loan from last season. New signing Reda Lalawi's not been able to be registered as of recording yet either. There is definitely a lack of squad depth at the moment, particularly in those attacking areas. Obviously, Liam Miller and Mohamed Baloumi could be like new signings next season, but they're both coming off the back of big injuries and may not necessarily be the same players straight away. You've also got only really Kyle Joseph as the only senior striker there who's yet to convince me that he can score consistently at this level. Akirovic could work his magic, and if the EFL restrictions are lifted and they're able to get a few more bodies in between now and the end of the window, Hull could surprise a few, but as things stand right now, I do think they'd be one of my picks for the bottom three. Predicted to finish in 21st and just surviving the drop, I've then gone for Charlton Athletic. It's been a really busy summer for Charlton so far, and I think a lot of their fans are quite excited about what this season could bring. The main concern I think a lot of people had with Charlton coming into this season would be potentially a lack of goals, but it looks like they've addressed that with the additions of Tanto Alafi and Charlie Kellman. Now, whether those two players can do with the business in the Championship, obviously it remains to be seen, but even if they take a little bit of time to get going, they've still got someone like a Matty Godden to lean back on, who you'd imagine still would be good for 6, 7, 8 goals in the Championship next season at least. In midfield, I think they're looking pretty competitive, although still could do with a starting quality number 10 in my opinion. And then having a manager like Nathan Jones, you'd imagine he be getting Charlton really quite ramped up for this new season. And defensively, you wouldn't imagine they're going to ship a ton of goals. All things considered, the players they brought in, I reckon they'll have just about enough to avoid the drop right now. They could even be more comfortable if they continue to add to their squad between now and the end of the window, but as of recording, it's around about 21st for Charlton, I'm feeling. Predicted to finish in 20th, I've then gone for my club, Preston North End. Now, it was a really positive start to the transfer window this summer for Preston. I think all North End fans knew that this summer was going to be a big revamp of the squad. We were quite proactive early on in the window with getting a lot of business and deals over the line. But of late, and in the build-up recently to this new Championship season, it feels like a lot of that momentum has fallen flat. The biggest concern I think a lot of people rightly have with this North End squad at the moment, and it's similar to a lot of the sides that are predicted to be in this region of the table, is just a lack of goals and quality in the final third. I think we're absolutely crying out for another creative number 10 to come into this squad at the moment. At this stage, we only really have Mads Frotgaard Jensen to fall back on, who, don't get me wrong, is a great player to watch on his day, but by no means someone that you'd probably hang your hat on in getting, double figures for assists next season, let's say. Add to that in the striker department as well, which I also think is lacking quality. Milutin Majic has the potential to hit double figures again, but with his disciplinary records, you never know what his availability is going to be like. Dan Jebison has the natural attributes to be a good forward at this level, but he's just never put all of that together. And then Michael Smith feels like a bit of a plan B option, really. It is a funny one with North End though, because having looked into a lot of our underlying data from last season, we were actually a better team in terms of a lot of those underlying stats last season under Heckingbottom than we were under the final season of Ryan Lowe when we finished 10th in the league. We were creating more chances last season under Hecky than we were under Lowe, and we were also facing less shots as well. But ultimately, we were one game away from going down last season, and that stuck with a lot of fans, I think. Having such a big rebuild and bringing so many new players into the squad, I feel like it will be a bit of a slow start to the season for us while we bed in all of these new players. What could shoot us up this table is if we do sign a quality number 9 and quality number 10 between now and the end of the market, but as things stand, I think we'll be in that relegation mix again, I really do. Predicted to finish in 19th, I've gone for Stoke City, the perennial underachievers in the Championship. Their last 3 campaigns at this level, they've finished 16th, 17th and 18th. I've got them one place lower in 19th. Now, it did feel like towards the back end of last season, in fairness, Mark Robbins was starting to pull things back after what was a really turbulent campaign last time around. Largely thanks to how bad they were in the first half of the campaign, Stoke's underlying data from last season was absolutely abysmal. They were a bottom 3 side for expected points, XG against, shots faced, shots on target face. Realistically, had it not been for Victor Johansson, Stoke probably would have gone down last season. The remit of Robbins this year, I think, is to make them more solid, more compact, to then build a platform that they can go on and make some steady progress in the years to come. I think they've started to do that with their recruitment. Obviously, the incomings of Televirov, I think, is a nice one. Getting Ashley Phillips back on loan for the season is good as well. Aaron Cresswell adds plenty of experience. I still think the squad has some shortcomings in terms of quality at the front end of the pitch, though, similar to like we've been discussing with the other sides that we've talked about so far. Although Stoke fans will be hoping that the likes of Robert Bosnick and Divin Mabama, who's come on loan from Manchester City, will make a bit of a difference in the final third, although Bosnick doesn't exactly come in with the best goal scoring record, and for someone like Mabama, who comes with a very good reputation, this is going to be his first season in senior football. I fancy Stoke to be quite prolific from set-piece situations. I think Sorba Thomas swinging them in with some of the big centre-halves they've got. I think from those situations they'll be pretty dangerous, but from open play, I still think there's maybe a bit of a lack of quality. Obviously, Berger's gone out. While he wasn't at his firing best last season, he's still a quality player that needs to be be replaced. And ultimately, with how competitive the rest of the league is looking, I feel like this could be another season of slight regression for the Potters. Coming in 18th place, I've gone for Blackburn Rovers, who are a bit of an enigma in these prediction videos, really. Their last 3 seasons in the Championship, Blackburn have finished 7th, 19th, and then 7th again. Really topsy-turvy side and a tough one to put your finger on. I do think last season they overperformed by pretty much every metric in terms of expectations at the start of the season. Their underlying data, which had them down as a sort of bottom half mid-table side, they were able to outdo all of those expectations. It was largely built around a solid defensive foundation, and then they had a few different periods of the season where, you know, some of their forwards caught fire. I do think that squad-wise, they are looking a bit weaker coming into this campaign, and further departures could be expected between now and the end of the window as well. Callum Britton still being heavily linked with the move away. There's constant murmurings around Lewis Travis and his future as well. A lot of the key players that squad was built around last season are no longer at the club or could be leaving. Blackburn tend to do a lot of their recruitment in the foreign European markets as well, which in fairness they've had a pretty decent hit record at, but it does tend to take those players a little bit of time to acclimatise to the level as well. I've still got a bit of a question mark over Big Val and whether he's the right man for Blackburn long term, but ultimately a lot of this prediction comes down to the uncertainty of the Venkies and everything going on above the football pitch, really. So for me, Blackburn 18th, could be higher, could be lower, who knows. Coming in 17th place, I've then gone for Portsmouth. Now I'm not going to lie, the next 5 or so teams that I've got predicted, I struggled to separate much, so the next few, I really don't think there's going to be a lot of points between come the end of the season, and you can put these clubs in any sort of order really, but after all my workings out, I ended up landing on Portsmouth in 17th. I think there is every chance that Pompey build upon the foundations they set from last season and kick on into maybe establishing themselves as a mid-table Championship club, but I'd also say that another season of consolidation is by no means a bad thing, especially in a league that's looking as competitive as it is this season. Goal scoring wise, I think there's a lot to like about this Pompey squad. I think it's certainly a team that's going to catch the eye on quite a few occasions. On both flanks, they've got quite a bit of pace. Obviously, Bishop's a really good number 9 for this level, and Lang playing off him. That's a partnership that has worked really well so far. Quality and depth, though, is one issue that I do have with this Pompey squad at the moment, and I mean we really saw at points of last season when the injuries built up just how badly that actually hampered them, coupled with the fact that they never quite seemed to crack the formula of winning away matches last season. Only Plymouth picked up fewer points than Portsmouth did on the road last season, and in 23 away games Portsmouth shipped 50 goals. Generally speaking, throughout the season, they did soak up quite a lot of pressure from the opposition, and that's still an area of vulnerability there. I mean, they conceded 71 goals last season, and as of right now, haven't massively added to that back line. But I still think they'll be more than good enough to beat the drop. The biggest concern for Pompey, maybe, is having such a promising manager like John Mousinho that if they start this season so well, potentially there's room there for him to get poached by someone else. But all things considered, a club moving in the right direction, I think they'll be fine next season. Coming in 16th, I've gone for Queen's Park Rangers, a similar region of the table as where they finished last season. Obviously, it's Martí Cifuentes going out and incoming Julian Stefan. I think on paper, QPR's fully fit starting 11, dare I say it, is capable maybe of getting within touching distance of the top 6. But once again, strength and depth may be a little bit of an issue, and there are a couple of areas of the squad that I still think are potentially holding them back from them reaching that next level. A quality centre forward is still something that I look at that QPR squad and think they could upgrade. Obviously, they brought in Burrell recently from Burton Albion. They'll be hoping that he can do the business for them in this upcoming season, but compared to the rest of the league, I still think there's more to be done there for QPR. The most exciting thing for QPR right now is that potential 3 playing off the striker in Kwame Poku, Ilias Chair and Karamoko Dembele. 3 brilliantly technical players who could link up and score quite a few exciting goals for this season. My only concern with those 3 players, though, is their availability. All 3 of them missed chunks of last season through injury. None of Poku, Chair or Dembele started more than 25 league matches last season. They all had a spell on the sidelines with an injury at one point. How likely is it that that's going to reoccur in this upcoming season, and that QPR are then struggling for a little bit of quality if, you know, 1 or 2 of those players are out injured? Listen, that could literally happen to any of these Championship clubs, and I think from front to back it's a fairly solid setup there. I just look at a few of the sides who I've got predicted to finish above them and think that maybe they'll have a little bit more. But any club in this region of the table, I think you could comfortably knock up or down 3 places and I wouldn't have too many complaints. There's not going to be a lot between them. Coming in 15th place, I've gone for Wrexham. I think this was one of the toughest predictions to make this season because they're such an unknown quantity coming into the Championship. Now, it does have to be said, in League One last season, their underlying data wasn't amazing, and under the usual circumstances, I think a lot of people would be tipping that sort of side to struggle in the Championship this season. The start to the transfer window was fairly slow for Wrexham as well, but over these last few weeks, things have really ramped up for them, not just in terms of the players they've signed so far, but the players they're now being linked to as well. As of recording, it still looks like they've got another at least 10 to 15 million to spend in this summer transfer window. I think what's also worth pointing out as well, that if we get to January and Wrexham are in any sort of relegation trouble, or dare I say it, they're sniffing around for a place in the top 6, you can bet that they're going to spend a hell of a lot in January to go all out for that. A few of the concerns I have with this team at the moment, though, I do think that Phil Parkinson is working with really quite a bloated squad in some parts, which could lead to some problems later down the line. And Parkinson himself, while he has done an absolutely tremendous job at Wrexham so far, the Championship's a different ballgame, and tactically I do think that some managers will outwit him this season, and as Wrexham won't have the talent advantage on the rest of the Championship as they have done in previous years, you know, in League 1, League 2, the National League, I have a feeling that this season may end up being more about consolidation rather than going for another consecutive promotion. So at the moment, I've got Wrexham around about 15th. The start of the season for them is going to be really interesting. Predicted to finish in 14th, I've currently got Swansea, ended last season in really good form. The trouble with doing these videos before the end of the transfer window is you don't have the full picture on what everyone's squad's going to be looking like. The thing holding Swansea back from properly challenging for the top 6 right now, in my opinion, is a quality number 9, but as I'm recording this, they're now being linked with Wycombe's Richard Coney. If they were able to get a deal like that over the line, then yeah, I'd probably be willing to bump them up quite a few places, because as of recording, you know, a strike force of Bobby Wells, Zander Potnik, Jerry Yates, Liam Cullen doesn't exactly fill me with the most confidence. But with that being said, the rest of the squad makeup I actually quite like. I think they've been quite savvy in the transfer market so far. Losing Harry Darling was obviously a bit of a blow, but I think to get in Cameron Burgess on a free transfer is a really good deal. Love the addition of Ethan Galbraith coming into midfield as well. And then Zidane Anusa's come in for quite big money, and there's a bit of an unknown quantity, but could be stardust in the Championship on the wing. Long term, there is still a bit of a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that is Alan Sheehan definitely the right man to take this Swansea squad forward? The proof will be in the pudding this season. Ultimately though, the track record of how many people step up from a background role into the managerial role on an interim basis at the end of a season, do really well, get given the main job, and then it all sorts of falls apart. We've seen that on quite a few occasions. Generally speaking though, I think it's a competitive squad, albeit lacking a little bit of stardust at the front end of the pitch, but that could still be addressed between now and the end of the window. Predicted to finish in 13th, I've then gone for Derby County. I'm quite positive on their chances this season for kicking on under John Eustace. Obviously, it was a bit of a calculated gamble that Eustace took last season to leave Blackburn when he did to take the Derby job, but ultimately, in the long run, I feel like that is a move that could be vindicated. I mean, here I've got Derby to finish above Blackburn this season. In the transfer window so far, I think they've been quite proactive. Adding more goals to the squad was absolutely vital, and I think they've done that so far, with obviously Carlton Morris coming in and Patrick Agyman, the big summer signing. They've added plenty of experience to that squad as well. They've got David Ozo back on loan for the season if he can stay fit, which is the big thing. I think he got a quality player there. But ultimately, a lot of this prediction comes down to rating John Eustace. I think he's a manager who, in the Championship, can consistently get teams performing above their level. Even if Derby are a bit of a tough watch at times next season, I still think he'll have them pushing up the league. Albeit, I think they're still crying out for a bit more pace and quality in those wide areas, but there's still time to add that. Predicted to finish in 12th place and a slight improvement on last season, I've gone for Watford, who I feel like could be quite a fun watch in this upcoming campaign. Now, this prediction could completely backfire if Watford start the season quite slowly. It takes Paolo Pezzolano a bit of time to get his ideas across, and they make a rash managerial change and it all goes up in smoke. But from the outside looking in, I'm a lot more positive on Watford's chances for this season now than I was at the end of last season. I was quite concerned with them back then, obviously. They ended last season in absolutely terrible form. It looked more than likely that a few of their big hitters would be leaving. Imran Louza, we got the story about earlier in the summer of him handing in a transfer request, but now seems to be on side with what the manager's doing. You then add into the fact that they've been quite ambitious during the market so far, obviously doing a lot of their recruitment in the European market, but the additions especially of Nestor Irankunda, who's come from Bayern Munich, and Luka Kermegard excite me, coupled with the players they've been able to keep hold of. From front to back, suddenly I think the squad is looking more balanced than it was last season. And in a league like this, I think as long as you've got 4 or 5 solid championship players who are going to be a 6 out of 10 most weeks, you couple that with a few of the Stardust players, that could be a recipe for getting you in top 6 contention. The only thing that holds me back from putting Watford that high up the table is potential unrest behind the scenes. But a finish of 12th would definitely be progress on last season. Predicted to finish in 11th place, I've gone for Bristol City. Now, it's all change at Ashton Gate over the summer, obviously, with Liam Manning going out and Gerhard Struber coming in. As appointments go, I actually think that Struber could be a decent fit at Bristol City. I quite liked his Barnsley side last time in the Championship. The only reason I've got Bristol City having a bit of a regression to the mean from last season is I think that a few of the sides who finished below them last season have maybe leapfrogged them with the recruitment this summer. Don't get me wrong, I think that Bristol City's summer transfer window has been steady. I think that Emil Rees, Adam Randall are solid pickups. Rees, I think, will be good for 10 to 15 goals next season, let's say. They've obviously added to their goalkeeping department as well, with Joe Lumley and Radek Vitek coming in on the back of that Max O'Leary injury. But last season, going off the underlying data for Bristol City, it was a bit of an overperformance, and the fact that the threshold for getting into the top 6 was quite low. Even if Bristol City performed to the exact same standards this season as they did last season, I think you're still likely to finish lower down in the table because of how competitive it's going to be. But I'd certainly have them in the mix, and you wouldn't fancy that many sides to go to Ashton Gate this season and walk away with all 3 points, would you? Predicted to finish in 10th place, I've gone for Middlesbrough, who I think are a bit of a tough side to call right now because I think they're going to do most of their business towards the end of the window. I think what they've been waiting for is a big sale, you know, whether that's going to be Hayden Hackney going out, obviously strong links to Ipswich at the moment, or a Rav van den Berg. They have finally got the wheels in motion over these last few days and have started to sign a few players, but it all feels a little bit slow at Borough this summer. They obviously took quite a while to get to the decision of dismissing Michael Carrick and then bringing in Rob Edwards, and then recruitment's taken quite a while to get going as well. But with potentially 20 or so million coming in from the sale of Hackney, you'd imagine they're going to be quite busy in the back end of the window. And I still think the core of that squad is quite good. The fully fit starting 11 that Middlesbrough have is definitely good enough to finish in the playoffs. It's just everything around that is a little bit flimsy and weak, really. Squad depth is a massive issue for Borough. I think there are a few question marks over Rob Edwards as well, and whether or not that's even an upgrade on Michael Carrick, who obviously didn't have Borough in the playoffs last season. But stacked up against the rest of the squads, I'd still have them there or thereabouts, but probably just to miss out again. Predicted to finish in 9th place, I've gone for West Bromwich Albion. Now, I must admit, from this point up to 6, at different points throughout the last week, I've had all of these sides in the playoffs at one point or another. So at one stage, I did have West Brom in my top 6, and I don't feel like there's a great deal to separate the next 3 sides especially. Ultimately, I quite like the core of this West Brom squad. I think that the way that last season fizzled out was really disappointing and definitely an underperformance given the base level of quality there. I think they've been quite concise with their transfer activity so far, but I like some of the additions. I'm especially interested to see how Hegebo gets on, their big summer striker signing. Ultimately, the unknown from West Brom this season comes from Ryan Mason. We just don't know what he's going to be like, what the level's going to be, whether he's the manager to squeeze everything out of this group and get them into the top 6 and over the line. Based on squad quality alone, I think the Baggies have to be in the conversation, but right now I've just got a few sides to finish above them. Predicted to finish in 8th place, I've gone for Norwich City. Another side I could definitely see gate crashing the top 6 this season, but I've got them just to fall short at this moment. Now, it's been a really proactive summer from the Canaries, following on from what was a really under par performance from them last season. Now, attack-wise, Norwich were one of the best teams in the Championship last season. Only Leeds scored more goals than they did, but it was at the opposite end of the pitch that they had all their undoings. This season, Liam Manning will be hoping that the additions of Vladan Kovacevic, Harry Darling, Jakov Medic will be able to ease some of those defensive lapses from last season. And once again, at the front end of the pitch, I think Norwich are looking really exciting. Despite the loss of Borja Sainz, still the potential to lose Josh Sargent. Mateus Kvistgaarden's really exciting. Papa Diallo's another eye-catching addition. And you've also got some of the players that were there last season, but I think could hit new heights under Liam Manning. I'm talking about the likes of Matej Jurasek, who we barely saw in the second half of last season, but certainly has the potential to be really good at this level. Antti Cernak as well, another one that I'd throw into that category. Ultimately, for me, it's quite an exciting group of players that I see scoring quite a few goals next season, under a good manager like Liam Manning as well, that for me definitely will be there or thereabouts. I'd certainly expect them to pick up high 60s, maybe even low 70s in terms of points. But is that going to be enough to get into the top 6? I've just got a few sides finishing above them. Finishing in 7th and just missing out on the top 6, I've gone for Millwall. They were there or thereabouts in that conversation last season, and I fancy Alex Neil's men to be knocking on the door of the top 6 once again. I think it's a really solid group of players from front to back. Transfer business they've done so far this summer I think has been quite proactive, not just in terms of the players they've been able to bring in, but the players they've kept on board so far. Japhet Tanganga, still a Millwall player. Ivanovic, while they were linked earlier in the window, is still a Millwall player. Then add in some of the additions that they've made on top of that, particularly the signing of Alfie Doherty from Luton. I think he gives Millwall an extra angle of creativity that perhaps they were lacking at points of last season. Defensively, I think Alex Neil will have them really strong again. I quite like the makeup of their midfield on the whole. Like the addition of someone like a Massimo Luongo, for example, to partner someone like a Casper Denor, who's really good. If Ivanovic can sustain the sort of form that he showed at the back end of last season for a full campaign, and someone like Josh Coburn stays fully fit and manages to hit the ground running, I really think Millwall are to be taken seriously and could be in that playoff conversation, but I've got them to fall short ever so slightly. I'm pipping them to the top 6. In 6th place, I've gone for Leicester City. Does seem a little bit low compared to where you usually predict the parachute teams to be, but ultimately with the Foxes, there are quite a few intangibles and hard things to predict that go into making this prediction. Obviously, it looks more than likely that they will be hit by some sort of point deduction. It's been rumoured that that'll be a 9-point deduction, but we don't have confirmation on that as of recording. The transfer activity has also been unbelievably slow. Only Asmir Begovic is their only incoming as of recording. They've lost players over the summer as well, the most notable being Jamie Vardy, but despite all of that, I still think it's a really competitive looking squad, especially starting 11. A lot of which were there for when Leicester were last in the Championship and they ran away with the title. Under a good solid coach like Martí Cifuentes, who's quite adaptable, even with a potential point deduction coming their way, I still fancy the Foxes to be in this playoff conversation, and I do fancy them to just get the better of some of those other sides who I've just got missing out, even with that deduction. Now, I do expect Leicester to add to their squad between now and the end of the window. I think that's inevitable, surely, particularly in the centre-forward department, where I think they're crying out for a new number 9 at the moment. It's only really Patson Daka who they've got to fall back upon, who isn't very reliable. But the rest of the squad, I think, is quite good. I think they've got some good options at centre-half. The likes of Skip and Winks in midfield, technically, I think, run rings around a lot of other Championship midfielders, and then you've got the likes of El Kanous, who's still there, Mavididi, Fatawu. These are game-changing players in the Championship. Even if Leicester are only going to supplement this squad with some high-quality loanees between now and the end of the window, I still give them a really good chance of making it into the top 6 and being potentially back in the Premier League if the playoffs go their way. To finish in 5th place, also making it into the playoffs, I've gone for Coventry. They've become a bit of a staple in this top 6 in recent years. In 2 of the last 3 Championship seasons, Coventry have finished in 5th, and that's exactly where I've got them to finish here. Not done loads of business this summer, but to be honest, I didn't think they needed to. Just a few nice top-ups on what is already a very quality Championship squad. The addition of Kane Kessler-Hayden I think is a really good one. Capable of playing on either flank, brings plenty of energy, really good at progressing the ball from those deeper positions into the attacking third. With the injury to Dovin, the addition of Carl Rushworth coming in on loan I think is a really sensible pickup as well. Don't get me wrong, I'd still expect a bit more business between now and the end of the window, but generally speaking, I think it's looking like quite a competitive squad from front to back. I think that Frank Lampard showcased last season that he knows how to tap into this group, get the best out of them. Although I'm not convinced anyone in that squad maybe next season will be scoring 20 goals plus, I think the goals will be fairly well shared around that team. And as of recording right now, I'm fairly confident that they get into the top 6. Predicted to finish in 4th, I've gone for Sheffield United. It's a regression of 1 place from last season, but I'm still fairly confident that the Blades will at least be in that playoff picture. Obviously, it's all been changed behind the scenes at Bramall Lane this summer, with Chris Wilder going out and Ruben Selles coming in. I do quite like Ruben Selles, but I think there's still questions over, obviously, whether or not he's the right man to take this squad forward long term. I just think the quality in this team speaks for itself, really. I think in Michael Cooper, they've got one of the best goalkeepers in the league. Ahmed Hozik's still there, one of the best centre-halves. Harrison Burrows, one of the best full-backs. Ollie Arblaster's brilliant. Gus Hamer, one of the best midfielders in the Championship. Going forward, an addition of someone like a Louis Barry, I think is really exciting if he keeps himself fit. I also think there's plenty of goals to be had with Tyrese Campbell. And even Tom Cannon, who I don't think Blades fans have seen the best of yet. I still think, as a bare minimum, Sheffield United have one of the 4 or 5 best squads in the league. And even if they still lose a big player between now and the end of the window, I still think they've got enough quality to carry them over the line. I'm just not quite sure whether they've got the same nous that they did under Wilder last season to be properly in the automatic promotion hunt again, but let's wait and see. And coming in third place, I've then gone for Birmingham. I'm really hot on Blues right now. I know there's a lot of hype around them at the moment, and I think that some people think they're being a bit overrated because of that, but I really think that Birmingham are to be taken seriously this season. I think the transfer activity so far this summer has been absolutely exceptional. And unlike some of the other teams who I've got maybe just missing out on the top 6, I think the strength and depth that Birmingham have coming into this season is absolutely amazing from front to back. I think this summer they've utilised the free agents market really well, particularly with the pickups of Brightside Samuel, Damari Gray, Phil Newman, who they got on a pre-contract. The loan market they've been really clever with as well, especially with the incomings of Cashin and Doyle. And then the big money sign is obviously Furuhashi. There's probably more money to be spent between now and the end of the summer as well. And what's also worth taking into consideration is, with how ambitious Birmingham are, if they are within a realistic chance of making the top 2 in January, or just consolidating themselves in the top 6, I absolutely guarantee that they'll go big in the January market once again. Maybe this is just me getting sucked into the hype at the moment, but I look at that team and I struggle to pick out many weaknesses. I think they're going to score a ton of goals this season, and I don't think they're going to concede that many either. Now, don't get me wrong, Chris Davis probably is going to have to be a bit more adaptable in the Championship this season than he was last time around in League One. But just stacking Birmingham's squad up against some of the others that they're going to be up against in the Championship next season, I do think Birmingham have a talent advantage over a lot of them. Obviously, signing as many players as they have, that could take time to mesh, and ultimately that's one of the only reasons why I think that maybe the top 2 could be beyond them this season, but certainly for a place in the top 6, I'm really quite confident Birmingham will make it. But my top 2 is probably quite predictable from here on in. In second place, I have got Southampton. I just look at that squad at the moment and think that it's a top 3 team minimum. From everything I've read about Will Still, I think he'll be quite a good match for this group of players as well. Looking to pick them up from what was, a dismal Premier League season last time around, but I think having that fresh sense of energy coming into the building, on top of a few of the signings that they've made so far, obviously transfer business has been quite slow and concise at Southampton, but given the players they've been able to retain so far, I don't feel like a great deal is needed. I look at that midfield especially, and I think they're just going to be able to control so many matches with the likes of Flynn Downs, Shea Charles, Mateus Fernandes who's still there, Joe Rebo, Will Smallbow. That's before you get into some of their attacking options, the likes of Tyler Diblin who's still there, Cameron Archer who's brilliant at this level, Brereton Diaz, Damon Downs, Ross Stewart, Adam Armstrong. The list is endless. I think the midfield makeup is why I like it so much. Under a manager like Will Still, who seems so switched on, so intense and demanding, I think we're going to see Southampton playing some nice stuff this season. And with the amount of goals I currently see in that squad, I think they're one of my picks for the top 2. But coming in as my title favourites, I have got it down as Ipswich Town. They're the favourites with the bookies and with a lot of neutrals, and for good reason. I could have tried to be a little bit different and gone with a more out-the-box pick, but both my head and I think my heart are saying that Ipswich will win this league title. Now, don't get me wrong, there could still be quite a bit of movement within that squad between now and the end of the window. Links to Amari Hutchinson in the Premier League aren't going away anytime soon. Obviously, Broadhead, another one who looks like he could be off as well. But like I was speaking about with Southampton before, the strength in depth there in numerous positions is so strong. Don't get me wrong, they're still light in midfield, but it looks like they're confident in getting that deal over the line for Hayden Hackney. And then pretty much everywhere else in the squad, I just think he's looking so strong for Championship standards. I think there's a ton of goals in this squad, a ton of creativity. Perhaps still lacking another natural number 9 to properly compete with George Hurst, but that could come later in the window. I think they've got one of the best, if not the best managers at this level as well in Kieran McKenna. The only thing I could see going against Ipswich this season is just potentially not being able to shake that negative momentum of that Premier League relegation from last season. You know, a potential cloud hanging over them like it did with Luton last time around. But with how switched on McKenna is, the personalities in that dressing room as well, you even add someone like an Ashley Young into that group who just for his experience alone could be absolutely vital. I think they're my favourites to win the league, and I think they are most people's for good reason. But there we have it, guys. That will wrap it up for today's video. As you can see to the side of me, those are my 1 to 24 predictions. I'd love to get your guys' verdict on these in the comments down below. Obviously, we are going to get some emotional comments of people that won't be too happy if I put your club a little bit lower than you wanted, but try and convince me in the comments down below why am I wrong about them, and put your neck on the line by leaving your own 1 to 24s. But apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.